When you told me that this episode was going to be about Chaco Canyon, I rushed to not look anything up about it, if that makes any sense.
I immediately stopped Googling things.
I immediately stopped. My hands froze above my keyboard. And I instead wondered if it had any connection to Mario Kart. Do you understand why?
So this is going to be one of the things that outs me as a big weirdo.
Okay.
My dad, who I love very much, he's a great guy.
But you're about to throw under the bus.
A little bit. So my dad in the early 90s decided that he had a laptop from work that he could bring home from work, and we could install Doom on it. But then we had to uninstall it by the end of the night, so we couldn't save any progress because he had to take it back to work the next day and he couldn't have games on his computer. And he concluded that was enough so that little Tristan did not need a Nintendo.
Didn't have Nintendo. Didn't have any Marios.
So I basically did not ever get a gaming console until the PlayStation era. So my first Nintendo console was a Nintendo 64, in which case I was already sort of on the upper age of real childhood stuff. But it basically means that Tristan has never owned. Actually, no, I have now owned my first Mario game, which is Super Mario Odyssey.
What a great game.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But it does mean that in a weird way, I have missed out on millennial nostalgia because where the part of my brain where everyone's dopamine receptors just start lighting up when they hear the Mario theme or Link doing something. To me, that space in my brain was filled with early 90s PC games, which was basically exclusively the realm of Gen Xers. So where Mario jumping on happy little mushrooms and shooting balls of fire, I assume, at Bowser.
Sure.
Where that part of the brain in my head is filled with Diablo, a rated mature game about delving into a dungeon beneath a church that is full of Satan and human devils and human sacrifice, and has a monster called the Butcher and a room full of human body parts and viscera.
Yeah. That's so close to Mario Kart that I feel like we have similar experiences.
Yeah. Just a little glimpse as to how I became this.
Well, so I bring it up because in Mario Kart 64 and other Mario Karts, but I believe it first appeared in Mario Kart 64, which is a game you presumably could have had because you had a Nintendo 64.
It's true, but once the 64, once I got the 64, I then didn't have the nostalgia of the old Mario games. Right. For me to then be I want to go and buy the Mario games. So when I had a 64, and the only games I had were Pokemon Snap.
But Mario Kart isn't really it's just a racing game.
Well,
it's just a race. It's a fun little racing game with your friends.
I mostly had Super Smash Brothers, and then I rented a bunch of games.
We can't get lost in the weeds talking about Nintendo 64. Mm-hmm. My point is there is a track in Mario Kart 64 called Chaco Mountain.
Okay.
And I thought, and it's, if you can believe it, it's a mountain of chocolate. Nintendo specifically says it's not edible and you cannot eat Chaco Mountain, but it is a chocolate mountain. And so I thought, I was is there some sort of connection between Chaco Mountain and the real life Chaco Canyon?
Is it obviously Southwest themed at all?
Well, that's what I was wondering. I was I don't know anything about Chaco Canyon, so maybe throughout this episode you'll say some stuff about it, and I'll be that's just the Mario thing.
Well, it is made of chocolate. I did not get to that part, but it's a little bit further down. Okay. But yes, Chaco Canyon is weirdly made of chocolate.
Yeah. Well, I think mystery solved immediately.
Yeah.
That was easy.
This was a podcast. What's it called? It's probably not aliens. It definitely is chocolate. It's not aliens.
Definitely is chocolate. Definitely is Mario Kart. But hey, this is a podcast, by the way.
This is a podcast that is happening now.
In this show, we look at ancient alien conspiracy theories. We mostly debunk them, right? But we look into them. And in doing so, we learn about the real life history of cool people and places and things. And this is a place. This is a place episode.
We're going to one of the prettiest parts of America, the Southwest, which I definitely love. I have a lot of
Southwestern Grill. My name is Scott Nicewander. I know nothing. I'm the host of this show that comes completely unprepared, except for the fact that I do have SuperMarioWiki.com pulled up on the page about Chaco Mountain. That's the extent of research that I have done.
Yeah, you're the one who, I'm the one who does the research with the library books. You're the one who finds the appropriate wikia for any given topic we're doing. Because I know you did find the Scooby-Doo stuff, and you did find, what was that weird, that boat show that you dug up from like the dark recesses of the high school on a boat?
The Sweet Life on Deck.
There you go. Yeah.
I forgot about that.
My name is Tristan Johnson, and I somehow cram enough stuff into my brain that I can satisfy my endless thirst to correct bad takes on TV.
Yes.
So today today we're doing, as I said, we're going to the Southwest, and oh boy, so this is going to touch on some previous episodes we did. This is going to touch on some funky things, and also just showing some really cool stuff that shows just how ancient the people on our continent are. So according to Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, hit me with it. What's this theory about Chaco Canyon? I keep wanting to say Chaco Mountain.
Yeah, Chaco Mountain. This is an opposite of a mountain.
This is the inverse Chaco Mountain.
Yeah, this is its arch nemesis. Nega Chaco Mountain.
Nega Chaco. Yeah.
So this is a place called Chaco Canyon, and according to Ancient Aliens, isn't it really strange that the petroglyphs depict strange human-like figures with antennae sticking out of their skulls? Yeah, you remember these.
We're doing it again.
Yeah, and that also, if you were to look at the Southwest ruins by the Puebloan people, that they mark the position of the stars, specifically the constellation Orion's Belt. So if you look at some of the ruins by ancient Pueblan people, you can see that their ruins all make the shape of Orion's Belt, and then the belt points to Chaco Canyon.
Okay.
And that you see this in various other places in ancient architecture or city planning. In Egypt and Heliopolis, you have ruins and pyramids and stuff like that are lined up like the Orion's Belt. And in the City of the Dead, the Mayan complex in the Street of the Dead in Mexico City also has an Orion's Belt that points at Cholula. And there's a lot of other places that they decided not to name that also show up. But the one that they wanted to draw attention to is Chaco Canyon, which is in New Mexico.
Yes.
So yeah, the sites point to Chaco Canyon. And according to them, they have a myth that the gods plan to destroy and then rebuild the world. So they built Chaco Canyon to measure the sort of potential of destruction to the planet, because there's no other reason to build there. There's no running water. There's no good soil. And the way they do it is at a place called Fajada Butte, which is this place where you see sun daggers that show whether or not the world is in balance. So that's all the things that they're going to talk, that they claimed was the whole story about Chaco Canyon.
A lot of stuff to hit on.
Yes. First things first, though, I want to get my extremely, not pedantic, I think this is an important thing, but my specific Mesoamerican nerdy thing has to get out of the way, which is...
Please do.
Just to show how they kind of got off on the wrong foot on this story, especially with Tristan specifically.
You are all... Look, I love some good pedantry, and you are more than welcome to do it in the face of Ancient Aliens, the TV show. So please, continue.
So just to show like a thing that puts a lot of questions into credibility, they do refer to the Street of the Dead in Mexico City being a Mayan complex that points at the Mayan complex of Cholula. I will refer to you that the Mayans lived several hundred kilometers south of Mexico City. And that they did not live, like Mexico City has not had Mayans live in it. Cholula is also not a Mayan site.
So they're just wrong?
They just called it Mayan, but this happens a lot when white people basically write about Mesoamerican people. So Cholula wasn't Mayan. Mexico City used to be called, because the thing is that Mexico City was built on top of what was at the time one of the largest cities on Earth. It was larger than Paris at the time of the arrival of the Spanish. It was a city called Tenochtitlan.
Yeah, we've talked about this before.
Yes, and it was the center of a massive empire, which was like a triple alliance of city-states. But this was the sort of biggest one of the Triple Alliance. And this is typically referred to as the Aztec Empire, not the Maya.
A little bit of a different thing.
Yes.
There.
They also did not speak the Maya language. They spoke a language called Nahuatl, which is sort of the language. And furthermore, the Maya lived in the southern part of Mexico, primarily in the Yucatan Peninsula, which is known for being a very wet, like jungle-y type place. I've been to Mexico City. Anybody who's been to central Mexico knows not very jungly, very, it's what's called semi-arid. It dry.
Very dry.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yes.
Very different thing. It's like the Ancient Aliens people probably watched Pirates of the Caribbean and they were like, I love that first movie where he steals the Mayan gold. And it's just like, it was Aztec gold.
It was Aztec gold.
You can't conflate the two of them. They're not the same thing.
Yeah. Speaking of that, a disturbing percentage of the Spanish gold reserve is still made up of melted down Aztec gold that maybe Spain should consider returning at some point.
If Spain does return all the gold, I believe that's what breaks the curse.
Yeah.
In Pirates of the Caribbean. So just throwing that out, just a little.
All of your economic woes, Spain.
Just a little pointer from me to you. If you want to break that curse, maybe give it back.
Oh, and also while you're at it, maybe returning King Moctezuma II's headdress that was stolen and is still in Spain to this day. When I was in the Museo Antropología de Mexico, which is like the big anthropology museum in Mexico City, they have a recreation of that headdress, and it says, the real one is in Spain. We have asked the Spanish politely to return it at some point.
And they said, we'll get back to you.
But the thing is that conflation of Aztec and Maya people is very common, and I don't like it. For example, almost every single time, including one time on on what's it called? What's the other green video history thing?
On Crash Course?
Crash Course, yes. On Crash Course, they referred to what they referred to was as a Maya calendar stone was indeed the sunstone, which was dug up in Mexico City in the 70s.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It happens a lot. Yes.
A lot.
So that's just one part. This has nothing to do with Chaco Canyon. That was just me being real, just to show that we already are off on the wrong foot when it comes to the way that they portrayed this.
So let's talk about, all right, now that we're a good bit into the episode, what is Chaco Canyon? Tell me about it.
This all comes from a guy, all of their research that they did for this episode, or all of their sort of evidence, comes from a guy by the name of Gary David, who was introduced on the show as an archaeoastronomer, which I found out is sort of a multidisciplinary field of like archaeologists who study the way that people in the past measured the stars and planets and stuff like that. But he's also the very red flag term that we say a lot on Ancient Aliens, independent researcher.
Oh.
Yeah, so he's the one who came to the conclusion that there's these cities in Arizona that are shaped like Orion's Belt and point at Chaco Canyon. In a book called The Orion Zone, Ancient Star Cities of the American Southwest, which is a book that I had to purchase on eBay for $30 so that I could do this episode. And it was an impenetrable mess to read, too. He also wrote books, and just to kind of give you an idea of the vibe of this guy, he also wrote a book called Eye of the Phoenix, Mysterious Visions and Secrets in the American Southwest, The Kivas of Heaven, Ancient Hopi Star Lore, and Star Shrines and Earthworks of the Desert Southwest. And his most recent book is Mirrors of Orion, Star Knowledge in the Ancient World. Keep in mind that this is a person writing about the Hopi people, about the Pueblan people, who goes by the name of Gary David.
Gary David. So probably not a person from there.
No.
Not a person from that culture.
His bona fides is that he is the owner of a master's degree in English literature,
Cool.
and has appeared in magazines by the names of Atlantis Rising, Fate,
Awesome.
Phoenix, Mysteries,
Okay.
Eric von Daniken's Sagenhafte Zeiten, or Legendary Times. Yep, we're back. It's our
Von
Daniken.
Eric Von Daniken.
UFO, just a magazine called UFO. And World Explorer. He's also been featured in Graham Hancock Readers Unraveling the Mysteries of Ancient Artifacts, which is on the Ancient Origins, which is a pseudo-archaeology website.
Of course it is.
And also wrote also part of a book called The Disinformation Guide to Ancient Civilizations. Also, astonishing archaeology and hidden history, which are all very academic sounding periodicals.
Hold on, is the Disinformation Guide to Ancient Civil, is that like a tongue-in-cheek thing, or are they like purposely being like, this is us spreading disinformation?
I think they're trying to say that the experts
everyone
are
else
lying to you. Yeah,
was I bet. But what a title though. Mm-hmm. It's accurate in a way they didn't intend.
Yeah. So according to him, these cities in Arizona, these monuments in Egypt, and all these other places all seem to have the shape of Orion's belt.
What is up with this guy's belt?
Yeah, well,
why is it so famous? Why is it so? I have a belt. No one talks about Scott's belt.
Well, according to Ancient Aliens, that this shows that that's probably where the aliens came from.
Oh.
Or I have another option, which is that Orion's belt is 3 stars in a line.
Unlike this podcast, which is 5 stars.
5-star podcast, 6 stars, even if you can manage it.
That'd be great.
But yeah, so Orion's belt is just 3 stars in a line with one of them slightly off. And you can imagine that there are many ways that people could arrange their cities or monuments so that they are in a line for some reason. Like, for example, the Mayan Road of the Dead, where they have these 3 monuments, is a street with a dead end where there's like 2 on one side and then there's 1 monument at the end of the street. So you could, and then they're like, look, that's the shape of Orion's belt.
It's a line.
We've
done this episode before.
This feels like a one where we're like reaching back, like this is the part. And I feel like as we do this show and we go deeper and deeper, we're gonna have more and more. We're gonna keep touching on all of this podcast is gonna have a deep canon and lore that you're gonna have to we're gonna have to refer back to episodes and stuff like that.
It's gonna have a deep canyon.
Ooh.
See what I'm saying there? Yeah.
Also, keep in mind, too, that Orion being a constellation is a very culturally specific constellation, and that every culture has completely different constellations of their own. And so even putting a significance on Orion's belt is sort of an imposition of like Western constellations on ancient peoples from completely different parts of the world.
Yeah, because we would see Orion's belt, but like other people could just see, I don't know, they might only take one of those stars into account for a different constellation.
Yeah.
Or 2, like they wouldn't necessarily see all 3 and just highlight those 3 and be like, that's a significant constellation, the same way that we would.
So Tristan spent a sad amount of time trying to find a map of the Hopi constellations. Can't find them. Mostly because probably, as I mentioned in the episode that we did on the religious background of the people here, they don't particularly want a lot of this stuff to be public because you're dealing into like parts of their religious practice that is kind of kept secret. So that's like how we're already off to the wrong foot. But
I don't want to steer the show but what is Chaco Canyon?
Well, that when I dug in turned out to be a very interesting question, and we will find out.
Okay, right now?
After this.
Oh, okay. I know that we typically ask people to rate and review the show after, like at the end of the episode, but I want to prove that this show is better than Orion's belt. And so if everyone can do 5 stars instead of 3 stars, we started out this show asking for 4 stars.
Yeah, that we will never live that one down.
We want to beat Orion by a couple more stars.
5
stars. Rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
As many stars as you can do. Yeah.
As many stars.
So Chaco Canyon is a canyon.
Awesome.
In New Mexico. And it's about 14 kilometers long, or 9 miles.
Thank you.
And on the canyon floor, the ancient Puebloan people, who, although this isn't the right name to go with these days, just because this is a name that, if you do recognize it, typically the word that used to be used a lot was Anasazi.
Okay.
But that term has fallen out of favor because it's sort of like... a very not nice word that we used to use for Inuit people in Canada, being a sort of term that another group gave them that sort of is a reference to like evil invaders type thing.
Oh,
so
that's no good.
Yeah, I know that. I think that it's basically considered a slur here in Canada, but I don't think it's considered one in America yet. The one for Inuit people.
Oh,
the E word.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying now. Yeah, I think it's definitely one that I would at least try to avoid. But yeah.
There aren't as many Inuit people in America, so I imagine it's less of a thing.
True.
So anyways, this the biggest site is Pueblo Bonito, which is a 2 acre or 0.81 hectare area. And it shows, it's a complex, but it shows some of the really amazing constructions that were done in this area, because this complex has 650 rooms in it.
That's a good Airbnb property.
Yeah.
You could be making money.
Plus, it's also 4 stories tall, and probably was for almost 1,000 years the only apartment buildings in the entirety of the Americas.
Oh my God, I was joking, but like it's an apartment complex.
Yeah,
that's really fun.
Yeah, like think about it. Like
cool.
this was most of these things were built in the 11th to 13th century, so like the medieval times, and they were building 4-story tall buildings that people were living in like apartments.
Yeah, because typically buildings usually would go outward, not upward.
Mm-hmm.
So 4 stories all the way back then. That's impressive.
Mm-hmm. Especially because that's really hard to do without steel. The reason why we built up is because we got a lot of steel. The way that they were able to do it is that they had this sort of masonry that was made of a mix of wood and mud, basically. But in order to make it strong enough, they had to have extremely thick walls. All of the walls of this complex were 91 centimeters thick, or 3 feet.
Whoa!
Yeah.
The Kool-Aid Man has no chance.
The Kool-Aid Man just shatters on the edge of the things. And there's a main central plaza that's bisected by a wall that's precisely aligned to north and south. And that's the biggest complex, but there are other complexes that have more than 200 rooms. There's some that even have up to 700 rooms. So this is not even the only complex in Chaco Canyon.
There's more.
There's also plenty of ceremonial structures that are called kivas that are common in there. And those are sort of a Puebloan place where you do religious ceremonies. I think they're still even used today in some case. But kivas have a large part in indigenous, like Southwestern indigenous culture.
Mm-hmm.
And they're built in proportion so that about 19, for every like 19 rooms, there was 1 kiva. And these would be used for religious rites, but also for political meetings, and had associations with the Kachina belief system, which is what we were talking about when we did our when we did our episode on the Zuni, and how it's a sort of religious structure that has a lot of mystery and secret associated with it. So I try not to dig too deep into their thing because it's their thing.
Yeah.
And to the modern Hopi people and other Puebloan people, kiva basically is a term now for a large circular underground room that's used for spirits.
I don't see a lot of circular rooms these days.
It's true.
You gotta get back at it.
We're all into minimalism now. Circles are too fancy. It's all squares.
It's all squares and even rounded rectangles.
We are as members of Nebula, we are contractually obligated to not say anything bad about rounded rectangles.
That's true. Rounded rectangles are awesome, actually.
Yeah.
And even YouTube's in on it now.
Yeah.
Good on YouTube.
Bevel every rectangle.
Yeah, I don't like corners.
Yeah.
I'll say it.
Fuck corners.
I'm not afraid.
I'm not in the pocket of big corner.
I don't like corners. I want boxing arenas to have rounded rectangles.
Yeah.
I don't want them to get into their own corners. I want them to get into their own little divots. Mm-hmm. Their own little arches.
This is a very strange yes and. But as I said, these sites, despite them being large and complex, are very old. The biggest sites seem to have their date of origin to about the 11th century, i.e. like 1000 AD, which is in Europe was basically the early Middle Ages.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, like the fall of Rome was about 700 years before that.
Oh, okay.
So just to because there's this whole false notion that indigenous peoples did not have like the same like level of like high high construction and sophistication and empire building that a lot of European countries did. They did.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like not only this, but like there's like Spanish explorers who went through places like modern day Arkansas and Florida and stuff like that wrote about seeing giant mounds and cities with roads between them and stuff like that, which then were all destroyed ruins by the time the British showed up because of them infections.
Right.
So the other thing too at this site that's really interesting is that they were really into turquoise.
Who isn't?
Which is sort of this this blue-green mineral that contains copper. And if you ever go to the American Southwest, there's so much turquoise and stuff. It's almost like a sort
of... Is that why it's a blue-green? Because it's copper and it's like oxidized?
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea. I just put, as soon as you said it had copper in it, I was like, that's why the color's there.
Well, it's mixed with a bunch of other things, but yeah, the sort of green color comes from, but like if you ever go to the South, I mean, you lived in Texas, there's probably some of this there too, where like a lot of like native art has turquoise in it.
Yeah, it's super pretty.
The other thing too is that Ancient Aliens wasn't wrong about the resources thing. Chaco Canyon is a lot drier than other parts of New Mexico, which is saying a lot. And it also doesn't have the same sort of coniferous trees that are plentiful to other places in the state.
What does coniferous mean?
It's a type of tree. It's like I think it's an evergreen tree.
Oh, cool.
Coniferous because it makes cones, like pine cones.
Oh, see, you're putting it together for me in my head. So they didn't have any of those.
Yeah.
No Christmas trees.
No. So because of this, there wasn't a lot of plants and wildlife in ancient times, and probably has something to do with the fact that the site was abandoned a long time ago because of overcultivation, overhunting, habitat destruction, and overpopulation.
Oh.
Probably at its peak, when there was like a wet period, the most amount of people who could have lived in this area was about 2,000.
Okay.
But that is, and so like, according to that, it's probably around sometime in like the mid 12th century, there was a 50-year drought. And that is when what's called the Chacoan civilization started to flounder and kind of collapse. And it was by the time Europeans showed up, this region was abandoned. It's because what happened is that they didn't have a lot of wood, which meant that they had to use a lot of what's called
chocolate
arroyo cutting, which is sort of a water intensive way of getting forest stuff. So there was a lot of deforestation, which caused a lot of economic destruction because you need wood to build things. And in order to get the wood to build things, they would have to go like, way far off to the mountainous regions. And like one example was the Chusca Mountains, and haul it back over 50 miles or 80 kilometers to the west to get it to Chaco Canyon in order to build things. So you can imagine that would have made building things complex. So that resulted in the community starting to depopulate. And probably by the end of the 12th century, it had been almost completely abandoned.
Makes sense.
But the thing is that there's a lot of these settlements. There's a lot of like housing and apartments for a place that couldn't have held that much of a population. And that was very interesting to people. So the suspicion that archaeologists have is that this site was important as a sort of ritual site because the canyon itself happens to align with the one of the lunar alignment paths, which means that at night the moon sort of arcs over the canyon. You can see it all the way from the time it comes up to the time it comes down.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I bet they got some cool photos back then.
Mm-hmm. And we can tell on pre-Columbian Instagram.
It took you a sec.
I'm like, wait, what? And this, the reason that this bears weight, and this is also kind of part of what they were talking about with sun daggers earlier, is that it does show that there's a lot of evidence that people of this time had a large preoccupation with the stars. I mean, there's not a lot of clouds in New Mexico, and there's not a lot of trees or there's mountains, but they're far enough away. So you could imagine
trees.
Yeah. So you could imagine, I mean, like I said, you lived in Texas, so you know that place can get very flat and very open. And you imagine living in a region like that, and then there's no streetlights, and nighttime when the stars come out, it would blow your mind.
Oh yeah.
So it does seem that stars and the patterns of the sun and moon and stuff like that played a lot into them and pretty much all civilizations throughout history.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, makes sense. Stars are pretty. I don't know if you've seen any recently, other than the big one that we see every day.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of light pollution where I live, so I don't really get to see many stars. Plus, it's also right now, as we are recording this, snowing pretty heavily. So So the big thing about this site is a place called Fajada Butte. So Butte.
Is that how you pronounce? I say Butte.
Butte.
Butte. Butte.
It's either butt or booty, whichever one you want.
It's either butt or booty. It can't be any of the things we're trying to say to sanitize it a little bit. All right. It's butt or booty. Butter booty.
Yes, butter booty.
That's not a phrase I love.
Yeah. So the thing is that you can see that there's a lot of religious significance to this place because there's no water source there, but there's a lot of small dwellings on the cliffs of this structure. Mm-hmm. And if you look at some of the pottery found, it shows that they occupied this place sometime between the 10th and 13th centuries, obviously like during the time of the Chacoan civilization. And it was thought of being this place where there's just a few, some art and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Until in 1977, an artist by the name of Anna Sofair went to Chaco Canyon as a volunteer to write down all of the rock art because there's a lot of interesting drawings on the rock. Like the people with the antenna, which we already talked about in a previous episode, is not a thing. It's not aliens, everybody. That's been pre-established. You can listen to Scott edit in what episode it is now.
You know what? Listen to all of our previous episodes.
It'll be in there somewhere.
Yeah. You'll eventually find it.
Mm-hmm. So she was there recording some of the rock art, and one of the interesting ones were these petroglyphs that sort of showed this swirling pattern, like these circles.
Okay.
And she noticed that at this place, there's some interesting stuff that goes on if you're there at just the right time. And that's why it's kind of called the Sun Dagger site. So what happens is that there's 3 stone slabs leaning against a cliff, which cause shadows to leave markings on these petroglyphs on the cliff wall, which basically what happens is that a dagger of light sort of comes down through the swirling circle. And it bisects one of the spirals. And what happens is that on the summer solstice, it pierces the larger of the 2 spirals. And there's other sun daggers that come down on very specific circles there on the winter solstice and the equinoxes.
This is like some Indiana Jones sort of thing where he's got the little staff and the sun comes in, shines in this way, like manipulating the sun in the light in a very interesting way.
Yep.
Very Legend of Zelda, which is a reference you wouldn't get, Mr. Yeah. I don't play Nintendo. I never grew up on Nintendo.
I have now one Zelda game.
Is it also the Switch one?
Yeah, it's Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild, yeah.
And the other thing too, on top of that, is that one of these circles, the biggest circle, also has a shadow that bisects the spiral as the moon rises at the extreme of the moon's 18 to 19 year cycle. So you can imagine aligning things so that it hits something that only comes every 18, 19 years is quite intense.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, it also, at its other extreme, which is 9.5 years later, the shadow of the rising moon falls on the left edge of the larger spiral. So this is insanely, it takes so much observation to make something like this work.
Incredibly thought out, incredibly detailed, precise, very, very intricate, very cool.
And according to Ancient Aliens, they do this because they know that if it's off, then it means the Earth is too far out of axis, which means that the aliens are coming back to destroy them or something.
Aliens are here. They messed with the Earth path, and Earth is off because of the aliens.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Now, if you're thinking, oh man, I want to see this cool thing happen, a couple bad things. One of those stone slabs that sets up the dagger has settled, and it means that the summer solstice sun dagger no longer works. This happened in 1989 or sometime in the 1980s.
And that's just that just happened naturally. No one did anything to it.
They think that it probably happened because of not that somebody destroyed it, but that due to people kind of wandering through the area and leaning on it or something like that, that eventually it sort of slowly moved out of position and now it doesn't work. So
I was hoping it would just be an accidental nature thing.
No, but in 1989, luckily the National Park Service did close off access to Fajada Butte because they believed that that foot traffic is what caused the slab to move out of place.
Right. Don't go there anymore.
Mm-hmm. Now the other thing too,
I never had a chance to go there. You had a couple months at least, maybe a year.
Yeah, it depends upon when they did it. In 89, I would have been a wee babby, but if I was dedicated enough, I would have if I had that hustle grind set, I could have seen it.
I've always heard that you lacked that as a baby. You just didn't have that hustle grind set.
I have a baby and he hasn't started a single business and he's almost 11 months old.
Get a job, baby.
All he does is sit around, crying, eating, laughing adorably.
Well, how much has he invested in crypto?
None at all.
Unbelievable. Maybe get a new baby.
Yeah, he hasn't even bought a single NFT. I offered him an NFT that was like a rock wearing a hat or something. He didn't want it. Instead, he wanted formula and hugs.
He didn't want to invest in Snazzy Stone?
No.
Didn't want to invest in Snazzy Stone?
Nope. He could have bought that for $680,000. Mm-hmm. It's worth about 17 cents now, but that doesn't matter. You buy the dip.
It doesn't matter. It dips and then it comes back and then we're going to the moon. That's all that matters.
To the moon. Speaking of the moon, petroglyphs.
Yes.
That's what they were doing. They were measuring when the stock was going to go to the moon.
If it was off, they knew that the aliens were here to come to rug the crypto. Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
You know what's the most this is completely off topic, but there was this amazing thing that kind of feels a little cryptocurrency like, which was that there was this civilization. I want to say it was like in sort of like New Guinea or something like that, where their money, their currency was like these giant rocks that weighed like hundreds of pounds and they couldn't move them. So all that just changed was who they said owned it.
Oh.
And so it feels a little bit like an NFT or something like that.
That person owns it now.
Yeah, that's Rob Stone.
That's Rob Stone now.
And I remember like early on in the crypto craze, there was that company that auctioned an NFT or something like that of like ownership of like a cube that you were allowed to see occasionally or something like that. It was very weird.
That's a pretty good deal. Most of the times with the NFTs, you don't even get the image of the thing. You just get like a link to the image.
You could say that you were an owner of a cube that was in a building, and if you were the owner of the NFT, the only thing you could do is that you could arrange to go see it.
That's more than most NFTs do. I think that's actually a pretty good deal.
I think it's because early on in the crypto craze, a cube made of tungsten became like a thing that they were obsessed with because tungsten's a very heavy metal. And so if you buy a cube made of tungsten, it's like, kind of like really heavy thing.
It's a good fidget toy.
Yeah. And I don't know why, but crypto people were really into that early on.
Super into it. Anyways,
the thing is that there's also some other sites that are close by that also have petroglyphs that show interesting patterns of light and shadow on solar noon, and also are very distinctive on the equinoxes and the solstices. Mm-hmm. But also some people have thought that it's possible that this might just be chance. Who knows? But it does show that they did have like a lot of awareness of this kind of thing, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And I would say Chaco Canyon is really cool. You should go visit it, but obviously the boots you can't go into the booty anymore.
You can't go. You can't. Tristan, is that a phrase you want out there on the internet? I guess so.
Oh boy,
you heard it here first, folks. Tristan says you can't go into the booty anymore.
You have to ask permission first.
Gotta ask.
Yeah. Always ask the government first before you go into the booty. Okay.
Gotta stop.
But basically, like, this is all I could find on Chaco Canyon. And again, I see zero place where aliens fit into any of this. Yeah. I've seen zero things that's like, I have seen nothing where, even if they did manage to like build their like monuments aligned with Orion's belt, like I could see them doing that because they too can see stars.
Right. Even if it wasn't intentionally, like, we see these specific 3 stars, which we don't even, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't even know if that was the case.
Yeah.
But even if it was, it doesn't mean anything about aliens. It just means that they could have seen those stars and were just like, let's line it up. Line it up.
They could have just done that. But again, Chaco Canyon is really cool. There's an amazing civilization that's like just shows just how deep and amazing indigenous civilizations way before, like, like hundreds of years before the first Europeans arrived, had built sophisticated buildings, had a very intricate knowledge of the movement of the sun and stars. And I kind of wanted to like jump in here and show that like there's this persistent myth. I made a video a long time ago about this, about how indigenous peoples like were less technologically advanced than Europeans when Europeans arrived, when really they were just as technologically developed. They just grew up in different contexts and were more into different things. Like, there's like a stuff about like how early Europeans were like, like these indigenous people don't have any farms. They must just be like, primitive people living off the land. And it's like, actually, they did have farms. They just had like farms that were made so that the plants all complemented each other so that they didn't have like monocrops. And they were so healthy in that sense that you didn't have to maintain them. So you could just come back and get free stuff later. And like they did a lot of like stuff like intentionally burning down forest, like areas of forest, because they knew that edible plants would grow in places where it had been burned. So that if they came back the next year, they would find like, blueberries now. Or intentionally cutting down places so that grass would grow so that they could increase the grazing land for buffalo that they could then move and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's people. It's like it's the Europeans judging their intelligence based off of like judging indigenous sort of cultures' intelligence off of their own sort of European ideas, which is obviously it's going to look totally like it's going to look quote unquote wrong to them because it's not what they're used to.
Yeah. And like it translates to a bunch of things. Like, for example, people were like, oh, they didn't have guns. Well, it's like, well, first of all, Europeans didn't invent guns. Arabs did. But the thing is that guns weren't really that useful for hunting until like the 19th century when rifling was invented. And archery is a lot more, it takes more skill to learn, but it's more accurate and quieter. Or things like how all of those Europeans with all their fancy boots were desperate to buy moccasins because moccasins were just way better designed. Like there's a sort of like retroactive justification of all this stuff. This is all in 1491, the book by Charles C. Mann that I think I recommended to you a long time ago. But yeah. And furthermore, like, again, people can be clever without aliens getting involved. And this is another case of exoticizing the indigenous people, especially indigenous people of the Southwest, who we have kind of already established on this podcast get unfairly sort of mythicized by people in like the New Age movement, but also in the UFO circles, mostly because they have a lot of religious practices that they don't allow to the public. And and it means that they have a lot of like symbology and stuff like that that is sort of, not, we don't know what it's for and they don't want to talk about it.
And that's fine. They don't have to talk about it.
They don't owe you an explanation to their religious life.
Yeah.
And they've become this like lightning rod for pseudoscience or like a focus for woo. And like, this is a big thing in the American Southwest. I think anybody who spends time in like places like New Mexico and Arizona know that there's like, weird New Age people show up for things there all the time. And it's based on basically like in exoticizing these people who are just normal people. And in many ways, people who are treated rather shittily by the United States who dominates over them. A lot of the reservations there are not like people like the Hopi and the Navajo and like all these groups are not having the greatest of times.
Right. I mean, I Googled it just to make sure, but yeah, New Mexico is like the nickname for New Mexico is literally the land of enchantment, which probably feeds into the whole New Agey sort of stuff in a weird way.
Yeah. I remember, I think I talked about how my mom is was sort of New Agey. I think she's less into it now. But when we went to Flagstaff, Arizona for a trip, we had to go see the psychic vortex. I don't know what a psychic vortex is, but and I was like, fuck that. I'm staying home and playing video games. Like I'm staying in the sort of like a cabin type thing. I just stayed there.
What video games did you play?
That was the summer of 2002, and I had a Game Boy Advance, and I think the game that I was obsessed with on that road trip was Castlevania Circle of the Moon.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe we should just like kind of appreciate how ancient the indigenous peoples of this continent are and how sophisticated their understanding of things actually is. That's sort of the thing I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So that is Chaco Canyon and the stars. Now I can finally burn my copy of the Orion Zone that I had to pay a whole lot of extra money for because I didn't want to give money to freaking Gary David. I was like, I had to pay like $15 extra because I had to get it off eBay.
And you know what? This podcast currently doesn't make money. If you're listening to it, I think we had one sponsor once. So if you love this show and you want to help us make money, so Tristan can get his money back for the book and research materials, and also just so we can live. so we can live, then please tell your friends about the show. I'm skipping ahead. Tell your friends about the show. Rate us 5 stars. Do all of that stuff.
Yeah. It really does help. It's, sharing this podcast with people in your life that you like and everything like that you think would like the stuff it's really great. Also, another way you can help out is checking out our other projects. Scott, I recently watched you and your wonderful girlfriend eat some of the most disgusting sandwiches I've ever seen in my life. If somebody wants to watch you eat really gross sandwiches, where should they go?
Currently, they have to go to Nebula. It only lives on Nebula right now, but it eventually will be up on my YouTube channel, Nerdsync, Nerdsync. I made a whole bunch of Scooby-Doo sandwiches with my girlfriend. It was a blast.
How was the sardines with chocolate sauce?
Sardines with marshmallow fudge was not good.
Not recommended.
Would not recommend. Tristan, you do other things as well.
I've heard rumors.
And you do them on a place called
Step Back. If you go to stepbackhistory.com, you can find my YouTube channel where I talk about basically why history is important for understanding the world we're living in. If you're listening to this on the day it comes out, which I think is like December or something. Let's see.
Yeah.
This episode's coming out on December 6th.
Oh yeah. My sandwich video will be up on YouTube by then.
Yeah. So if you're watching this if you're listening to this on the day it comes out, I should have a video about why the political compass must die.
Do it.
It's going to be pretty fun. And also go to probsnotaliens.com to listen to get on this podcast wherever you can get it.
Here's the thing. Normally we start this outro. We're thrown off in this outro because normally we start by saying, go follow us on Twitter at probsnotaliens.
But Twitter won't exist by now.
I do not know. I'm not exaggerating or playing up when I say I genuinely do not know if Twitter will exist by the time that this episode comes out.
I might eat these words, but right before I came to record this show, I was just reading from some Twitter engineers because today was the day we recorded this was the day that Elon Musk said, push yes or get fired.
Yeah. He's like, get on that hustle grind set.
Yeah, push yes or get fired. But apparently a lot of the outgoing engineers have pointed out that the stockpiling of problems means that Twitter might have days, not weeks.
So if Twitter's up, you can follow us at Probs But otherwise, just follow us at our YouTube projects. That's Nerdsync and Step Back.
We should get a Probably Not Aliens Mastodon or something.
Probs Not Aliens maybe I'll have to set that. I don't know. Who knows anymore? Probsnotaliens.com. It's a website that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Twitter can't take that from us.
Yeah.
All right. That's where you'll find us.
But that's all for now, Scott.
Yeah. Once again, I'm Scott Nicewander.
I'm Tristan Johnson. And the truth is out there. Probably. Butter booty.
Butter booty. Butter booty. Butter booty. Butter booty. Butter booty. Butter booty.